So, thank you for coming. And like I said just a little bit ago, this is going to be pretty informal since it's just me and you and the mayor and Mrs. Piper. But what I wanted to do, and the whole purpose of all of the class idea, is just to be able to provide the information more in an intimate setting, I mean, something that where, you don't have a bunch of people asking questions and, sometimes it gets confusing. It's confusing enough as it is.
Right.
And then when you have more people, discussing it at the same time, it tends to get a little more confusing. And when was it? It was probably a couple of months ago. I sat with the mayor and Ms. Janelle, and we were actually just kind of going over the millage rate, and it ended up being a really good just discussion. I mean, it ended up going really good, and it helped Mrs. Piper understand the whole process of millage and how we get to our numbers, why we decide to either go with the suggested rollback rate, stay the same, or increase our rates. So I thought it was a really good informational discussion, and I thought, this would be great to be able to provide to the citizens in a more smaller setting. Which is where the whole class idea came from. Now, it was very spontaneous to do it, so I'm glad that, at least somebody signed up for it. But it was pretty spontaneous as far as the decision of, when to do it. And I called the mayor and said, hey, I'd like to do this. And he's like, I think it's a great idea. How about next week? So I apologize if there's a lot of information. We're just going to go through it, and any questions that you have, I guess, at any time, especially since it's just us, feel free to ask, and the same thing with you. And the mayor, too, if anybody has any questions, we'll just ignore the camera and just be us. So,
That's
okay.
right.
So the tax report that I had prepared and we had given to council, it was presented at the September 9th council meeting. So at that point, on September 9th, it was given to all the council members, and we also provided it to all citizens. As we're going through, I know you've already read a good portion of it, but a lot of the report just starts out, what is an ad valorem tax? Sometimes a lot of people don't even really know what it is other than just a tax. But the ad valorem tax is basically a property tax, whether it's personal property, real property, it can be land, it can be timber. There are different categories that fall under the ad valorem, but what we're discussing is going to be about property taxes. So, and it is a source of revenue for local governments and for small local governments like the city to our budget, and it's very important to allow all of our departments to have the equipment that they need to be able to do their jobs. It helps fund staff. We have just hired 2 additional people in our public works department. Without the ad valorem taxes, for Statham, $290,000 is a lot of money. Our total budget is about $3 million, about $4.5 million with the projects that we've got coming up. But so yeah, almost $300,000 is a lot of money for the city of Statham. The tax, the amount of tax that anybody pays is determined by the millage rate, which is levied by individual entities such as the city of Statham. We have our own ad valorem tax. The city of Jefferson has their own ad valorem. I know that's Jackson County, but I think the city of Auburn, they have an ad valorem millage rate for property taxes as well. And then Barrow County has their own. So everybody has their own ad valorem tax. So I know that a lot of people, say that, or I've heard that the frustrations about Barrow County increasing their taxes. we don't get any of that. You know, so it is, to the citizen, it is in addition to. So it is essentially two separate taxes that you are paying. So just to clarify that, you know, whatever Barrow County levies, the city of Statham does not get a portion of that. As far as other portions of revenue that the city of Statham receives, you know, we received SPLOST money. We also receive revenue from our planning and zoning, so that's building permits, application fees. Yes. So what I brought was, this is a revenue and expenditure statement up through, actually yesterday. I printed it at 10:25 at 2:30. So this just from the beginning of our fiscal year, so from July 1st through yesterday's date, this provides us information on all of the different sources of revenue that the city has. So, you know, and I'll be more than happy, you can have this because I can print another one at any time, but just to give you an idea of what money the city of Statham collects, where we collect it from, you know, whether it's the general fund or from utility funds, and then also our SPLOST money is also included in here. And then it also gives all of our expenditures. So this is for you to take home with you, but like I said, after you look at this, you're more than welcome to give me a call or whatever anytime to, you know, if you don't know what something's for, you know, feel free to ask me. But we will end up going back to this once we start getting through the information. So as far as property taxes, the importance of property taxes is often misled, I think. Taxes are subject to criticism anywhere you go, and understandably so. I just got our tax bill on our house, and it shot through the roof too, just like everybody else's. But the importance of the property taxes is what we want to discuss. So the amount of ad valorem taxes that taxpayers pay is based on value. So it's basically based on a person's wealth. So the wealth being determined by, we'll say the state of Georgia, you know, what they determine is wealth, and wealth consists of property. You know, whether it's land, whether it's equipment, whether it's machinery, whether it's a house. It can be you know, somebody built a big barn, you know, that all of that increases your value, so all of that ultimately increases your overall wealth. So the amount that you pay is based on a person's wealth. All real and personal property is taxable unless it has been exempted by law. Now, the city of Statham does not handle exemptions directly. Anytime that somebody wants to file for any sort of exemption, it has to be done through the county. But there are different types of exemptions that people can apply for. Homestead exemption is one of them. And then they have some living spouse exemptions for veterans or those who've been, you know, killed in action. Over the age of 65, I believe, is also another exemption. So there are multiple exemptions that people can apply for, but that's not anything that's done through the city of Statham. Now, if somebody does apply for a homestead exemption, back through the county, and then the county would take a look at their application and their reasoning for the exemption, and then in turn, they provide us a reassessment of their property. Now, a lot of times, by the time that somebody applies for a homestead exemption, because that's the most common, that we do not receive the reassessed after the person has already paid for their property taxes. You know, because maybe they come in and they just pay for it and they're still waiting for their application. If something like that happens, which that has happened, we usually either refund the citizen whatever that difference is that they have overpaid after the exemption, or we'll even apply it to next year's taxes, you know, whichever they would prefer. You know, but with the city being, I'm going to say, a little behind on approving our millage rate this year, typically we like to have it done and approved by the end of October, not the end of November. Yeah, so tax bills are going to go out a little bit later than they did last year, which is neither here or there to the citizen because they just have to pay it within, they have to pay it, no less than 45 days after the bill is received. So whether we send it out November 1st, December 1st, or January 1st, the days that a citizen has to pay it is still going to be the same. Yeah. So, but for our purposes and for budgeting purposes, we prefer to have it out about this time so we can start collecting them before the end of the year. Because then that allows us to look at the budget 50% of the way through the year so we can kind of see, what we've collected. As of right now, you can see that we, as of yesterday, we have only collected $1,700 in property tax of the $295 that we budgeted. I said, we're at 1%. I like to be at about 50 at the end of December. Yeah.
And do you get our property assessments from Bear County, or
Yes.
does the state do their own
Nope.
assessments? Everything's from Bear
Nope.
County.
So the whole process is, is interesting, and I have in our little packets here all the information so we can kind of go over it together, just so you can see where I get my numbers and the process that we have to do in order to even get our proposed millage rate. Okay. A lot of questions, I've seen on social media, people will make comments about, what the money is being used for or what is thought the money is being used for. And on page 6, you can see that I have listed really pretty specific details on where the money that we use, what all it goes towards. Obviously, the support of the administration, to provide financial support to the library over here in Statham, to pay salaries for employees, including police officers, public works, up here, city staff, finance department, the mayor and council, and it also goes towards any benefits that, whether it's deferred compensation, whether it's insurance benefits. So all of the money that we collect goes towards paying for that. To pay municipal court expenses, and this is something that people don't think about, but we don't have a jail.
Right.
So in order for us, in order for the police department to put anybody in jail after making any arrest, we have to do that. So a lot of fees are assessed on a monthly basis after each court. So it's determined based on, court costs and that kind of thing. But, we have to pay Barrow County for those services because we don't have those services here ourselves. Professional fees, so a lot, the property taxes goes towards paying the city attorney fees, engineering fees, other professional fees that we might use for water, sewer, planning and zoning consulting fees. Let's see, to help pay city debt and interest on any bonds, loans, and leases. We have a few out there. We have a few. We have a few loans and leases, and we have our Series 2012 revenue bond, which we will be paying on until 2033. Yeah. Upgrading equipment for public safety, the police department, and those are very expensive expenditures, but they're also very needed. If we don't supply them with the tools and the resources to our officers or public works, then they cannot do their job effectively. Whether it's upgrade in equipment, tasers, cameras, vehicles, ammunition, protective equipment such as guns, all of that has to be upgraded because then it poses a safety hazard. Vests. We have to buy vests. I think it's 3 or 4 years is what the, let's say, the expiration date is on a vest.
No.
I don't know if they start deteriorating. I don't know the science of it, but usually about every 4 years we have to upgrade all of those vests. Vests are $1,100 each, just for a vest. So a lot of it is just upgrading equipment, and our citizens have seen a lot more of that in the last 2 years, and they'll probably see it next year as well. But I think once we get to a certain point where we have upgraded all the equipment for the police department, we've added the vehicles that they need, so we can get 24-hour coverage on the road. You know, once we purchase this equipment, then I think that we'll be good for about 3 or 4 years, then we're gonna have to start upgrading again. Yeah, but it is a constant rotation. Public buildings, to acquire, improve, and maintain public buildings. You know, when the library's AC unit went out, you know, we have to go over and repair that. When, over at the Hillman, when was it there? A few months ago, somebody was trying to break into the Hillman Community Center, ripped out the AC unit and trying to rip out the copper and everything else. We have to pay for all that. And so, you know, the renovations that we did here in City Hall last year, you know, which was desperately needed, you know, so all of this comes out of all of the revenue, including the property taxes. Do you have any questions about as far as where property taxes go, or?
No, not really, no.
So the first thing that, and before we get into the rollback rate, I want to briefly go over the process of how it all begins. Okay. So the first thing that the mayor and council does is approve a budget, and we approve the budget before the beginning of the next fiscal year. So I think this last year we approved it June 24th, 23rd, something like that. So we approve it at the regular meeting in June, so it's set for July 1st, ready to go. Now, you can approve it earlier than that. You can also approve it later than that. You don't want to approve any budget later than the beginning of the fiscal year, because then you're running off of what's left in the prior year's budget. So it's very important, and it's critical in government to approve your budget before the beginning of your fiscal year, because at that point you may not have any funds to run on anything. And we were kind of getting to that point where it's like, if we don't have to make a decision, you know, we're going to have to, what are we going to do? Because when you have no money, you can't run. And we were getting fairly close to that this last year, so it was a little stressful, you know, but we got it done. So when and the budget will be in another class, but just to give you a brief overview, when we start on the budget, basically, you know, what I'll do is I go to each department, and I will meet with our Public Works Director. What type of equipment are you wanting this year? What type of equipment do you need this year? We talk about personnel. We talk about projects that we have upcoming. It might be road repair, street repair, signs, culvert repair, anything stormwater. So it really does, it takes several weeks to speak to each department about what their needs and wants are for that upcoming year. We also have budget request forms that I give to each department, and that provides a good starting point for each department, you know, to sit down amongst themselves together. And, you know, like this last year, I know that Chief Underwood met with the captain and even met with a couple of the other officers, the investigation officer at the time, you know, so they sit down with different sub-departments in their department, and they complete the budget request forms. They may give, I think the police department this year gave me probably 40 different budget request forms, which is great, because I'm not saying that you're going to get everything that you want, but at least if it's something that we didn't include in this year, I put it in FY23 and I put it in the folder and said, let's revisit this for next year. Same thing with the Public Works Department. You know, Jordan filled out several budget request forms. Actually, I even made the mayor fill out some budget request forms. You know, so we, you know, any department head, mayor and council, and I actually had council fill out budget request forms. So it, you know, once I get them all collected and I start putting in the initial numbers for the budget, it kind of lets us know where we're at. You know, is it something that can be done this year? You know, is it something that can wait until next year? Because we've got A, B, and C that has maybe a higher importance of getting it done quicker than something else. So, but like I said, you know, the first go around is a lot of information, but that's how we that's how we get to, and you kind of weed through the things, and then we present it to council, and if you remember the very first meeting that we had, it was not a balanced budget. And it wasn't a balanced budget at that point because it was basically everybody's request. So it gave the citizens and the council an idea of how much we were over budget. So, no, it was not balanced initially because I think it's important for people, citizens in general, to understand this is how much we need, and we're only bringing this much income in, revenue. So we can't get everything that we want. All right, so let's start, budget meeting number one. Let's weed out what we absolutely don't need, and let's weed out what we can wait until next year. And I'll put that in my file, FY23. So by the second meeting, I think we got it down to what, it's been a long time now, but it feels like it's been a while. But within, what, 3,000? Was it 3? Okay. Second meeting, I think we got within $3,000, of a balanced budget. Much easier to handle than $365,000. So the very first process is getting a budget. Now, going with our conversation on millage rate, the reason why the budget is important when it comes to the millage rate, because council voted to approve, we'll say, $295,000 worth of revenue. We did not have our digest from the county yet. We don't, matter of fact, I just got this in probably at either the very end of August or the very 1st of September. I'm thinking it was more towards the end of August because I had this done September 9th. So let's just say, the end of August is when we receive it. We approved this in June. And the reason why we came up with $295,000 is because the year before we collected about $295,000. So actually, I think we increased it just a little bit this year, but we don't want to inflate this number too much because, well, we just don't want to, but because we're going to base our millage rate off of what we need, right, as far as our property tax revenue line item goes. So first thing, we approved $295,000 worth of property taxes because it was pretty close to what we collected the year before. So when I start the millage rate process, in your little folders here, actually, we'll probably go ahead and start separating some of this out. Okay. All right. So this form right here, this paper, should be maybe the third one down in your, behind that one. There you go. So this is how I calculate the millage rate. So this is the formula that is used. So we take our total budgeted expenses for the fiscal year. So for the FY22 budget, the total expenses, didn't give me the total. Anyway, the total expenses is $4.5 million. We are expensing for the FY22. Okay. We take the revenue other than property tax. So I take all of our total revenue minus the $295, and I come up with a $4.276 million. Okay. So then I have to take what our budgeted revenue was, the $295, and divide that by the total assessed value of all the taxable property, which is in the consolidated digest that the county gives me. So, yep. So when I take the formula and I enter all of the information. Basically, it starts with the budget. You know, it starts with the property tax, and it starts with our expenses, and then and what are the difference between the property taxes and the other revenue, and that is how the millage rate is calculated. So, which gets me to the 4.345. So, if you take into consideration the formula, if the $295,000 that we projected to receive and need, because we've already done and expensed it all, right, throughout the budget, if that was lower, then the millage rate would be lower.
I see.
Yes. So the more that we say that we're going to collect, the more that we're, the less that we'll need, I guess.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Now, the millage rate, the 4.345, which is what we are proposing for this tax year, by taking, actually I printed each one of these for you. You got that? Mm-hmm. There you go. Okay. So, like I said, this is a lot of information. I apologize, but
That's great.
yeah. So this form is called the PT 32-1. So the form 32-1 is how I figure out basically what the proposed millage rate is and what the rollback rate is. Okay. So I take all of the information from the digest that they give me, and I enter it into the Excel spreadsheet. If anything that's highlighted yellow, those are basically the only places that I can make a change to. Anything that's in gray, that is part of the state's formula, so I can't mess with whatever goes in the gray component.
Right.
So I take the 2020 digest from last year, okay, and then I enter in the reassessments, and then I enter in the digest from 2021, and then it gives me, I enter in my proposed rate based on what formula, what my formula says. And then based on the last year's digest and this year's digest, automatically calculates what the millage rate, rollback rate should be. Okay. Now, the roll is what is suggested what our millage rate should be based on the numbers that they give me, and what I enter into the spreadsheet. It is up to the city on whether or not we want to accept the rollback rate, or we want to go with our own proposed millage rate based on the revenue that we need in order for us to balance our budget, we'll say.
Right.
Yeah. So, but this form.
So this number isn't any part of
Nope.
this calculation?
Nope.
Okay, so,
Nope.
gotcha.
So, so if the city, no, it's not. Now, here's the kicker. Okay, so this is the rollback rate that this formula provided by the state tells me that we should have, and that we should make it 3.725. So that's the rollback rate, I put in mine, that is the increase. Now, the 16.64% increase in the millage rate tax, that is not from, the increase percentage is actually from the rollback rate, not even what the increase is from last year.
Right.
So that's, I don't like that because it looks like we've increased it a lot more than what we really did compared to last year, but that's the formula that I have to use. So I suppose, in the state of Georgia's mind, well, if you're not going to accept what we're proposing your rollback rate to be, then it's an increase at all. It's an increase from what we're suggesting you to accept.
Right.
Now, if you look at, let's see. Yes. Now, in this document here, which is this very first section, okay, this one here, it's called Tax Digest Consolidated Summary, How to Interpret. So all of this information in this document, if you look on page, alrighty, like on the third page, the third and the fourth page, it gives you the definitions of the property code. So one thing that's tricky about the Form 32.1 is that I have to break down, right, the digest that the county gives me according to residential, agriculture, conservation, industrial, commercial, and then on top of that, whether it's personal property, aircraft, is it a boat, is it inventory? So all of the numbers that are here, you can see where it says real property, personal property,
Right.
motor vehicles, all of that is broken down, and all of it is based on the digest with me. So at the end of the day, our number, let's see, the 67,000 is what our net digest is after, after exemptions based on what the digest is given. And you can see the little codes here. So if you look at the property, the description of property code, see, you can see where it says RT, see, R. So we know that this is residential, but then it's R1, R3, R4, and RB. And then you have to go back to why did this increase or decrease? Improvements, R1. So we've got, with $39 million of improvements. Now improvements might be additions, might be additional homes. It might be, when the tax assessors, cruise around, we'll say, Statham, they take a look at properties. They probably don't look at every single one every year. I don't see how that would even be possible. I'm sure that they probably do a lot of their guesstimates, we'll say, on new subdivisions, new houses being built, and the status of a neighborhood being built. So let's just say one tract of land that's 50 acres, it's just been bought. And in this year, it was just rezoned, but they hadn't done anything yet.
Right.
Next year, when they're doing the assessments all over again, it's been graded, it's been cleared, they've got infrastructure in, they've got the streets, curbs, gutters, and they've got the water and sewer lines in. Then that value is going to be increased so much more.
Sure.
By the, maybe the third or the fourth year, when it's built out, then that will maximize. So it is a process, and I do not envy them or their jobs at all.
Sure.
So when I calculate the millage rate, I'm basing it solely off of the digest that the county provides us. Okay. Now, if you look at, I think I also included, this is the city of Statham. This is a 5-year history, because I have to advertise this every year, and it's probably behind these pages.
Next to the last.
Next to last one? Okay.
Or about 3 from the back. Get the red lettering.
I can share this one. So this is the city of Statham's 5-year history. So every year in the newspaper, before the millage rate is voted on, we have to advertise what the 5-year history for Statham is. So if you look back at, in 2017, Statham was 4.917. The following year, the city accepted the rollback rate at 4.355. But next year, they accepted the rollback rate. Last year, we accepted the rollback rate. This year, we're not proposing to accept the rollback rate. And let me tell you why. So this is something that is actually interesting. When the city of Statham, we've seen a lot of growth in the last, I don't know, well, I mean, it really started in about in 2017, 2007. It really started, and then it just came to a screeching halt during the recession. After things started calming down, 2016, 17, things started to pick back up a little bit. During the last 15 years, Statham has, be careful how I word this. Statham probably didn't upgrade infrastructure or take care a lot of the capital projects that should have been taken care of a decade ago. There's a lot of stuff that we are now just catching up on. We're spending a lot of money, not because we have it, but because we have to. So when things get put on the back burner, because it's scary to spend that money, you know. So when a project is going to cost $3.5 million, that's a lot of money, and that's a lot of money to commit your citizens to. So, and it's not just Statham. I mean, it's everywhere. You know, you have an administration, meaning you have a mayor, a council, and staff that maybe they didn't want to spend that money because, well, we need our parks upgraded. So it's a lot easier on the eyes and the ears to our citizens that we're going to spend X amount of dollars on parks, not roads, because they're getting, like spending money on a park is, we'll say, more visually appealing than roads or sewer or water lines, because that's, you know, obviously it's important, but it's not intangible, but it's intangible to the eyes, I guess, because you can't really see what's underground. So, you know, I think that there's just always something that that Statham felt took precedent over repairing our water and sewer lines. So now these rollback rates, they're great. Rollback rates are great because it's essentially saving the citizens money. As our property digest increases, the rollback rate is also going to increase because they're saying, okay, well, you've got more value, you're going to receive more in property taxes this year. That now you can roll back your rate to match that increase in value. You know, but the problem that we are at now is that because we've rolled it back, you know, for the last 5 to 6 years, we don't have that extra revenue that we should to be able to make the improvements and upgrades and repairs and rehabilitation to so many projects throughout Statham that we're now faced with. Fortunately, and I truly say fortunately, the citizens are blessed with a mayor and council. And whereas maybe in, you know, 5, 10, 20 years that, you know, it was just pushed to the side, you've got somebody who says, well, we've been putting this off for way too long. Citizens are going to hate me for it because they don't, you know, they can't see what's underground, you know, they want to see something for their money, you know, but it's just gotten to the point now that we can't accept the rollback rate because now we're so far behind in our projects and infrastructure to upgrade and rehab that we've got to use our proposed millage rate based on the revenue that was budgeted. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. Now, also,
So it's almost kind of a thing of bite the bullet for 1, possibly 2 years without doing a rollback.
Yep.
Get these infrastructure work done.
Yep.
And then go back to possibly going back to the rollback
right.
in a couple of years.
Now, next year, our assessed values are probably going to increase again. We're going to have more homes come in. We're going to have, you know, property values are probably going to continue to increase. I would say yes for the next several years until we can't be built out anymore, we'll say. So our assessed value is going to increase, which is going to, in turn, increase the amount of our rollback rate. But so next year, if we say that we're just gonna stick with, like, say the rollback rate next year is 3.25. When we say, well, we're going to keep it at 4.3, so no, we're not gonna increase it from next year, the way that it's gonna calculate this, it's probably gonna jump up to a 24% increase, because we're not accepting their yet lowered millage rate because of our assessed value. So, yes, so next year, we're going to look in the same position that we are right now.
What is the actual increase from the 2020 to the 21? The 4.003 to 4.345?
Yes.
What percentage rate is that actually?
I think they figured it was 13.
Yeah, I think it was 13, we did figure that out. Yes. Actually, no, yes, that might be right around 13%.
But considering based on what 2017 was,
Right,
we're actually at a much lower millage
Oh.
rate.
absolutely. Mhm. And in 2017, you know, our, now these are in, now, I'm sorry, the 2021 column is red because I have not put in the information yet. So, you know, I have not entered the 2021 partially because, honestly, I'm not for sure whether or not we're going to, you know, council's going to vote to increase the proposed millage rate, or if they're going to go ahead and accept the proposed rollback rate. So, and that's going to make a huge difference. So, what the difference equates to is about $40,000. So if, meaning that if the rollback rate, the 3.375, I'm sorry, 3.725 to the 4.3, the difference between that accumulates to right around $40,000 in revenue. So if council elects to accept the rollback rate, then that means that we will have to do a budget amendment of that difference. So what I'll have to do is the formula here, I'm going to have to basically do it reversed with the rollback, or I'm sorry, with the rollback rate, the 3.7. So it's going to tell me how much that is going to be raised, you know, how much revenue we will raise with that millage rate based on our assessed values. We're going to have to do a budget amendment, and we're going to have to go through the budget and eliminate $40,000, you know, worth of revenue, one, and two, expenditures. So that means the department is going to be cut somewhere,
Right.
which is what we don't want to do because we have well, first of all, I mean, we've expended it, and we've expended it based on the needs of that department. So, can I cut $40,000 from the budget? Sure. But some department is going to, you know, suffer for that, and that's not what we want to do, unless it's a project, which leads us to what we've been doing this whole time. We're just gonna, I mean, I can eliminate $40,000 out of a project real quick, and I don't have to take anything from any department, but that project's not gonna get done. And like I said, that's where it just goes into the next year, and the next year, and it keeps snowballing. Exactly.
So to put it in perspective, based on what I anticipate our new assessed value with the home improvements that we made, it's gonna be a difference for us of about $55.80, which is less than $5 a month.
Now, yes, and I included that in your little packet.
Yeah, so, because
Oh, here it is. It's right here. There,
our new assessed value was 228, so I just took the 225 home value. The assessed value then would be 90,000. If you look at what,
These are
if we
examples.
took the rollback of 3,725, then our city tax would be 335.25. But if the city goes with the 4.345, then we would pay 391.05, and that's a difference of
Correct.
55.80
Yes.
for a year, which
Right.
is less than $5 a month.
Yes. So,
Okay.
yes, so
Just
this sheet,
making my understanding.
yes. So, you know, exactly what he was saying, you know, so this sheet just provides information on the difference between the rollback rate and what is proposed, and the bottom dollar, how much it's gonna cost additional to the citizen. So, you know, for $150,000 home, the assessed value is 40% of what your actual home value is, okay? So we take your assessed value and you multiply that by the rollback rate, and the city tax would be $223.50 at the rollback rate at 3.725. At the proposed rate of 4.345, it'd be $260 for a difference of $37.
Gotcha.
You know, so in dollars and cents, for a $350,000 home, $86 extra
Wow.
for the proposed millage rate, right? Yeah. Now, I'm not dismissing these numbers because, you know, $75 a year can be a difference for somebody's budget, household budget, especially for folks who are on restricted income, or maybe they're just on Social Security or SSI, or, you know, something like that. So I'm not dismissing it, but it is important that that people see the difference that it's going to cost them if council approves the proposed millage rate of 4.345. Yeah. Yeah. Now on this document here again, right here. This is something that's pretty interesting here, too. There are 3 different points of view when it comes to taxes. And I wanted to include this information because really it's pretty interesting how different everybody looks at it. So you have, looking at taxes and millage rates, the first view being the macro view. The macro view is what the levying authority, or in our case, the city of Statham, focuses their attention on. So the mayor and council is considered the macro view. City council members look at the total digest and the taxpayers as a whole. You know, so levying authorities pay close attention to the budget view as well, because what they elect to set as their millage rate also affects what the overall budget is going to be. Is it going to remain the same, or do we need to amend it? Okay. The micro view is how the burden of paying taxes directly affects the citizen or the taxpayer, because they're just, you know, they're just focusing on this bottom dollar.
Right.
You know, they're not looking, a typical citizen isn't looking at everything where the money goes and what's needed. And rightfully so. I mean, it's money, you know, their money is very important to them. It's, you know, it's important to the community, and it's, you know, they work hard for their money, so they want to know where it's going. Yeah. Of course, the budget view, that's how I'm looking at it, you know, because, you know, the mayor hired me as his, you know, as the city accountant, and every week, actually, I look at this every day, sometimes, you know, multiple times a day, because I have to look and see where we are in the budget year, how much we've used of that particular budget. You know, I have to pay close attention to this, and if something looks off to me, I can go into this line item, and I can, we'll say, expand on that, and I can look to see everything that was collected in that one line item, and if something doesn't match up, you know, I can make that adjustment and move it to the appropriate or the correct, you know, allocation or line item. But if something, and we did this last year, especially once you get down towards the end of the fiscal year, I mean, line items are being pushed, and sometimes they've gone over.
Right.
And as long as we stay within a balanced budget, then we're okay. So let's just say we haven't done anything illegal, so to speak. So we've got the Public Works Department and we've got the Police Department under General Fund, under Fund 100, okay? Let's just say that the Public Works Department did not go over their budget at all, but the Police Department went over their budget by $20,000. As long as we've got $20,000 that's left over in another department within the general fund, then we're okay. Now, I say that very, I say that, yes, like I don't want any department to go over budget, and I make sure that I keep them in line. We've made some changes this year to help, accountability and help control that a little bit. Which I think internal controls is very important, because it starts with the internal controls and goes through each employee to each department head, to back to the mayor. I mean, it all ends with the mayor. So, everybody has to be accountable, and we've placed some additional internal control, which is what we've lacked in the past. You can tell that with our audits. And in our audits and our financial statements, part of what the last 4 audits have provided is, internal controls needs to be better handled. So we've been implementing that, and we've been doing that, and I'm actually, and a lot of it is just training and understanding, our public works director, he had never been talked to about the budget, and last year, actually 2 budgets ago now, wow, sitting down with him and going over the budget and how it works. I'll tell you what, that guy is like, he crosses his T's and dots his I's, and now, before any purchase is made, if he has a question, he's gonna verify what line item it needs to go in, whether or not it's been budgeted. If it's not been budgeted, can we use any sort of contingency? So just with sitting down and taking the time with the department heads to give them a better clarity and understanding of how a budget works, why it's important, it has really, I think it has really helped everybody. Each department has been very good this year. Yeah, I'm very proud of them. So let's see. If you look at page 12, okay. And the formula down at the bottom is how you calculate your millage rate. So when I'm filling out the 32-1 form here, how I enter this number is based on this formula. So I take the government operating expenses minus the revenue from all sources other than property tax, and I get the $295,000. If I take that and I divide that by the total assessed value based on what the county gives me in the digest, that's how you figure out the millage rate. Yeah. So then that's how I calculate. So I enter all the yellow information based on the digest, what we need based on this formula, and that's how the increase and the proposed rollback rate are calculated. So, like I said, it's not, all of it is formula based. It truly is, and it's not anything that that I just, that I make up or I come up with myself. Yeah. And I included the copy of the form and the tax report. Now the form PT38, this is our millage rate certification. So as soon as council votes on a millage, whatever that might be, I have to fill out this form, and then I have to send this to the county, who then turns and sends it to the state. And then, of course, I included the tax digest in here as well. Yeah, so it's, something that's also interesting is that why are ad valorem taxes so important? It's because, let's see, they are direct benefits to those who pay it. So even though it might be underground, it might be above ground, all of the revenue that we collect and use turns around and goes right back into something directly for the citizens of Statham. And it's a predictable source of revenue. What is the saying, that there are only two things in life that are certain, and that's taxes and death? Yes. So, it is a reliable source of revenue. And it's predictable because we can predict based on the assessment how much we're gonna receive. Property taxes accumulate for an average of 44% of general fund revenue. That's counties, 27 for cities, 27% of general fund revenue. So when, if you go home and you're looking at this revenue and expenditure statement, if you look under the revenue column and anything that is 100, 004 under revenue, that is our general fund. So if you take 27% of our total general fund revenue, actually, and I already did the calculation, I think for Statham, we were at 16% of our general fund revenue. So we're actually below what the average for cities is as far as collection goes. But yes, that's how you can figure up that assessment. There's another side of the revenue. So you take all of the Fund 100 revenue, add that up, and figure up the percentage, and the average is 27% for cities, 44% for counties.
And we're at 16%?
I think we're right around 16, because I did figure it out, and I thought I had it in here. Actually, I know I did on the last page, maybe under my final thought. Okay, right here. Property taxes for the city of Statham accumulate for 16.48% of general fund revenue. So we are about 10% below city average in the state of Georgia.
Page 11.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, I thought that I included it in here. Questions, do you?
No,
What,
that 16.48, is that because of all the previous rollbacks, or it's just completely independent?
it's independent, that is this year. Mhm. Yeah,
It's
so,
just
I
based
mean,
on the budget. that we
it's
passed.
based on the budget. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, now on page 5, this is how anybody can figure up how much they're gonna pay in taxes based on the millage rate. Whether they live in Statham, and Winder, and Auburn, or they're in a county, anybody can figure out how much they are going to pay in taxes based on what their home assessed value is
So as long as they know what the millage rate is
in
in
their,
there, on the size.
uh-huh, yep, they can figure it out. There we go.
Seems like they ought to come up with a better way of saying that our non-rollback is 16% increase, you know?
I know.
Well,
Just
that
seems like it's kind
explains
of-
why citizens of Winder were in such an uproar. It looked like theirs jumped, 25% or something crazy.
Yeah,
But it probably was the same situation where they kept rolling it back and rolling it back.
yeah, well, actually, Winder had a 3 mil fire tax, basically. So they would roll back, when I worked in Winder, we rolled back every year to 0. Okay, so our rollback rate was 0 because they did not have property taxes, but they did implement a special fire tax at 3 mils. So the fire tax basically was used to offset the expense of their first responders. So, I think theirs went up 100%, wasn't it?
112.
Yeah, I was thinking right over 100%, and it's because they are taking their millage from 3 to 6, I believe is what it ended up being. So it's 100% increase, whereas they've never had a property tax before. So the whole percentage thing, you know, Mrs. Piper's right. The whole percentage thing definitely, you know, skews that number a little bit. You know, but like I said, I guess the way that the state sees it, if you don't accept our rate, it's an increase no matter what. You know, so, you know, and that's why, you know, in the report, I wanted to differentiate that. You know, yes, it's 16% increase from the rollback rate, but from what we're proposing, it's, I don't even think it was 13, I think it was lower than 13%.
Well, it definitely makes a lot of sense, therefore, I appreciate you explaining it again, because each time you explain it, I learn something new.
Yeah, it's just,
It just makes a whole lot more sense now, because as a citizen, my property taxes were a complete mystery to me. It was whatever
you know, whatever they
sent me,
Right.
okay, but it never made sense. Now it makes sense, and I really appreciate all the effort in all of this. It makes it very
Yeah.
clear.
It's interesting, you know, it's interesting to figure out how much you need. It's also interesting to, but, I mean, I'm just a numbers girl, I like numbers. But it's fun to try to figure out, because you have to do a lot of investigative work, and you're looking at the digest and you're entering the information based on how they tell you to interpret it. I mean, all of it is just, there's so many pieces that go into establishing a millage rate. And, but, you know, and honestly, any other time, I would say, let's go with the rollback rate. But we are just in a unique situation because there are so many things that Statham has not done over the last 2 decades that we're just now getting the support needed from mayor and council to be able to get those done first.
Right.
You know, and, you know,
It's like around 8%.
okay, yeah,
If we went
from the
last year
4.003,
to what we would like to see this year.
right,
But again, the state says this is what you
Right.
should be, and that's what we have to base it on. So instead of an 8% difference, it's 16.
Well, and in layman's terms, what you're trying to explain with why the rollbacks aren't working, it's kind of like a homeowner. It's say you budgeted $20,000 because you're gonna put a new roof or something on the house, and when they tear the roof off, they find out that all the rafters are rotted.
right,
Well, you just spent $15,000 on new rafters, which you can't see,
right,
to put a pretty new roof on.
right.
And that's what we're gonna have to do with our infrastructure.
So somebody would look at your roof and go, you paid $35,000 for that?
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Well, but 15 is
Right.
underneath, and you can't see
Or
it.
you had to replace all your electrical or all your plumbing.
Right.
Those are things you cannot see,
Exactly.
but you need the function.
But
And that's what our city needs, the function, is we need to replace these things.
Right.
We're just not gonna be able to see it.
Right. You know, and, you know, I hope that we collect more than what we budget. I definitely don't want to collect any less. But if we are able to even collect more, meaning maybe the reassessed values might be off, you know, because at the same time, the county's just estimating, you know, so all of budgets are estimates, no matter which way you look at it, which is why you'll like the budget class, because how we budget is also very intricate. It is a lot of detail and a lot of taking estimates, and you know, but to be able to producing a budget and even a millage rate takes a mayor, council, and staff that can look into the future, and you have to be able to have, you know, those skills, we'll say, to be able to look, okay, well, you know, what are we going to be doing 3 years down the road that has to get done? You know, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road. You know, because you know, when we're figuring up the budgeted revenue for the next fiscal year, we sit and we look at every development, every piece of property that could potentially be bought, how many homes based on that zoning could potentially come in? How close are we to getting to an application? It takes a lot of work to be able to think and look at something that's not there, you know. And I'm going to say this mayor probably isn't going to be known for all the beautiful parks and trails that they've established, but he is saving the city for the next 30 plus years by advocating to upgrade, you know, which, you know, is would be a feather in any mayor's cap, because you can say, look, you know, I know they probably didn't like me, I didn't put in the sidewalk that they wanted me to put in, but, you know, I upgraded their infrastructure, and they don't have to worry about, you know, which way their, you know, sewer lines are going, I guess, you know, so, or where it's gonna go, or, you know, geez, I mean, I think we've got terracotta pipes, you know, throughout our city, you know, so, things that should have been replaced 30 years ago, and we're still running on them. You know, so, it's definitely good to work for a mayor who sees the importance of updating the infrastructure. Yeah. You know, before I was here in Statham, I worked for the city of Winder, and the current mayor, Mayor Maynard, was in the exact same position that Mayor Piper is in. In 2012, when he first took office, Winder was a situation. They had sewers that were upwards of 70 and 80 years old, you know, and that had just not been repaired or replaced. And he knew the importance of it. He's also in construction, so his background was in construction, so, you know, he had a little, maybe a little more sense of, you know, the importance of infrastructure and how it all works. Yeah, so ever since then, they've just been updating so much of their infrastructure. And since he's been there since 2012, so he's been the mayor for almost 10 years now. Yeah. They're just now, this last year, getting started on all those pretty projects that people can see.
Right.
They're pretty
But it took them 8 years to get there, after doing everything that was necessary. So, you know, we just really, you just have to ask citizens, hang in there. We've got to do what's important first. You know, not saying that that's not important. We've got to do what's necessary first, and let's get this done and taken care of, and then make these investments to ensure your longevity of living in Statham. And then, you know, we'll do the stuff above ground that is going to make Statham much prettier. So, all those amenities. Yeah, but, yeah, it's definitely a process. But it's,
Thank you. I know I've sit through this a couple times, but
Each time you learn something else.
pick up a little bit of something,
yeah.
and it helps to put it in perspective and in line from a citizen standpoint,
Right.
not from my office
Yeah.
standpoint. So,
Yeah. Oh, well, I do the same, but now, you know, since I've been doing this, when we got our tax bill, and, you know, and my husband's like, you know, 20, you know, it went up from last year, now it's up to $2,900, you know, and it's like, you know, and all calculations are running through my head. Yeah, so it's hard for me to get angry at my own tax bill, because I understand it. I understand it. And as long as I can justify that, you know, I live in Jackson County, the Jackson County is, you know, doing these same types of things, which they are, then we know it's going to good use. Do you have any?